Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Appreciate you coming forward to testify here before the Ag Committee today, and appreciate your service as Secretary. I think back on some of the conversations we had the last time you were before the committee, which has been some time now, and but I think the number one thing that I wanted to ask if you could speak to is that we're watching the biodiesel plants across the country be mothballed and shut down. I think I can count 14 of them in Iowa. I can count one that is being dismantled and shipped to India, and they're waiting yet for a decision from this Congress on that. Blender's credited. I think there are some in Congress that don't understand that there are millions of dollars that have been invested to try to follow the direction of the government's lead on renewable fuels. Now they find their capital frozen or devalued in waiting for this Congress to follow through. If you could speak to that issue, I'd appreciate it.
Congressman, I appreciate you raising this issue, and it, from my perspective, it's long overdue that we address this issue and that we provide this industry, which is vital to our capacity to be more independent in terms of our fuel sources and creating that kind of economic opportunity I talked about earlier. That tax extension has to take place, and it needs to take place yesterday. There's been some indication, hopefully it gets done before Memorial Day. That would certainly be my wish and my hope and my prayer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And just inquire, is there dialogue among the cabinet? Do you know I know that the administration seems to be supportive of this. Is there dialogue, or is there anything where we can find a place where we can bring our argument to get this to move, or is it just, do you think, tied up because of the legislative process?
My sense, and I could be wrong about this, Congressman, is that there is more of the congressional process in play here. I don't think there's any question that the administration is supportive of this. I've talked to the President specifically about this issue, and I know where he is. I've talked to White House officials about this issue. I know where they are. They see this as important. If it were by itself, it would be one thing, but apparently it's tied up in a series of other issues. But my hope is that it gets done. And frankly, if I can take your question and just take it one step further, I really think all of us collectively need to do more work on how we can build the infrastructure that can support this industry, this biofuels industry. We've got a lot of programs that you all put in the 2008 Farm Bill, and we're beginning to get money out the door, but we have to go to the next step of what is the distribution system going to look like? How do we nationalize the biofuels industry so that it's not just a congressman from Iowa that's asking these questions, but it's folks in all parts of the country that understand that they can play in this game and that they have an important opportunity in this. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think I hear from the strongest of voice that we stand together on that same issue, and that we want to follow through on our commitment. It's part of the overall energy independence this country needs to move towards. And so as we transition into the subject, I recall an exchange that we had the last time you testified before the committee, and had to do with the cap and trade piece of this thing. And a lot has happened since that period of time with revelations of how the data was managed, and how credible some of the scientists who have been the lead voices in global warming argument, or the climate change argument. And have you had an opportunity to go back and review that science, and are you of the same position today, or has anything changed within that position on the science component?
Well, I have reviewed the science, and it doesn't fundamentally change my attitude about this, Congressman. I tell you, I deal with the consequences of this every day. Probably the most prime example of this is the issue that we're dealing with out in the western part of the country with the bark beetle infestation. The reality is that because winters are not as severe as they once were, these beetles in part survived the winter before they died. And I've been told, and I don't know whether the statistic is accurate or not, but I think it may be, there's over 7 million acres that are now impacted by this bark beetle, and we expect and anticipate 100,000 trees a day to fall because of it for the next decade.
Well, thank you. And I recall I went up to Canada and heard their presentation also. About 80% of the timber in British Columbia was going to perish because of the bark beetle. And one of the things they told us up there was that they had to be a sustained temperature of 45 below in order to kill the bark beetle off in the wintertime. And so that's a piece of data that I'd inject into this processing. And I don't want to have a debate on this. I just was interested in your perspective, and I very much appreciate your perspective on the renewable fuels component, the blender's credit that's necessary at this point, and the viability of this first generation of ethanol and biodiesel has got to be there if we're ever going to get to the second generation of renewable fuels. And that's what I'd close with, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Secretary, and I yield back the balance of my time.